Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Hearth and Homeschool here at the Catholic Mama YouTube channel. I am doing this video actually because I had asked some questions, or I'd opened the floor on Instagram to questions about homeschooling and how I might be able to help. And a lot of the questions revolve around women who are just starting to think about homeschooling. Maybe their children are on the younger ages and they're realizing that the school years are swiftly approaching, or they have children who are in elementary school ages and they're thinking about pulling them from that and homeschooling rather than sending them to a public school. It's very interesting to note that homeschooling has doubled in the past year. Since 2000, between 2019 and 2020, homeschooling has doubled. And when the government did this survey about homeschooling, they made sure to separate out those who were doing virtual schooling with their public or private schools. So these are families who are truly just deciding to homeschool. I'm sure there's a myriad reasons of why this is happening, but the world's getting a little wilder. Maybe you want to have your children at home. But I'm not going to talk about the reasons for homeschooling this time, although I have talked about setting up a homeschool and like Catholic Homeschooling 101 on my podcast, but it's been a while. It's been like over a year since I've done that, and things have changed in our homeschool. So I'm going to instead, in this episode, or this video, share what my process for when I started even thinking about homeschooling, those beginning months and years. I knew from a very early point, like by the time my oldest was 1, that I didn't want to send our children to school, at least not public school. And as we had more children, I realized that we probably couldn't afford 12 years for each child of private school. So that left really the only option for us was to homeschool. Now, I will say my husband was very skeptical. I was not so much. In 10th grade, I had a really bad case of mono and wound up having to stay home. I never started 10th grade and wound up doing school by myself at home with just whatever schoolwork my mom would come in and go and pick up, or a teacher would drop off, for about 3 or 4 months. So I schooled myself at home using the public school curriculum, but I did it by myself. And I realized that I had a teacher come in for math and French, but other than that, I was on my own for everything. And I realized at that time that maybe I was pretty good, or I could do it. It demystified homeschooling to the point where I thought, well, I can teach myself. And I actually wound up taking most of my undergraduate and graduate level classes all online, which wasn't really a thing back in the early 2000s when I was doing this. So this was before, virtual stuff was really, distance learning was normal. So I had a good confidence that I could teach. I taught myself. Why couldn't I teach at least the younger grades on my own? However, my husband is very skeptical. He was nervous that our children would not be well socialized. He had some the stigma left over about homeschooling from previous years, where you knew the one homeschool kid who wound up transitioning to public school, and they were a little funny. So he was nervous about that, and he was also really nervous that our children would fall behind. And maybe I wouldn't just be able to teach them certain lessons and subjects, or they wouldn't like me as their teacher, and it would be a fight. I knew a girl who her mother allowed her to homeschool herself, and mom was very hands off, and the girl just wound up sleeping in all the time and staying up really late. And without that kind of structure, she wound up having to go back to public school and repeat a grade. So while we started in the same year, she graduated the year after us. So my husband had some issues with homeschooling that needed to be addressed. So I'll talk about that a little later. But I had known pretty early on that I wanted to homeschool. And I thought, let me dip my feet in with preschool. Let's see what we like, what we don't like, what doesn't work for us, what does. And so I wound up doing a whole lot of research. And as you would expect from somebody who has no idea what they're doing and has nobody to talk to about what they're trying to do, I made a lot of mistakes. Especially, it really boiled down to me trying to do everything all on my own, all from scratch. I, at one point, I should go back and see if I still have these Google spreadsheets. Were just absurd with the amount of activities and books and projects and supplies. It was just such an expensive way to do things. I tried to create a theme for every week and stick to that theme with everything from snacks to books to crafts that we were going to do. It was exhausting and it was really expensive and it was just too much. I mean, especially at that age that I was trying to do this, was like 3 and 4 years old. It was a lot of work and nobody wanted to do it. Like the kids were excited, but then I also realized that I was trying to entertain them more than educate them. And that's a big thing that I wanted to steer. I realized I wanted to steer away from. You want the learning part to be fun, and you want the kids to enjoy it, but that doesn't mean it's entertainment. You don't have to have a project, a special project, or a special food for everything. You can, just read a book. You can happen to maybe have a snack that's on theme at some point, but I'm like a themed party person. I really love that stuff. So I went whole hog and tried to do a bunch of like crazy themes, and it was a lot of work. Then I made mistake number 2 as we got into homeschooling. I went in the opposite direction. Rather than have it be fun at all, it was so bare bones, and I was so I wound up becoming lazy, and it was not as bright and colorful. Not necessarily, I'm talking about like, making your school space colorful. No, it wasn't it wasn't beautiful at all the way we did homeschool. It was very, very bare bones. It was all about education, no fun. And it was really boring. And we all got burnt out like halfway through the year. So, big mistakes, right? Trying to do too much and then doing too little and growing in laziness, because I just didn't want to put in too much of the effort. I was like, oh, the kids, we'll do art projects another time. We don't have to do that in school. We know that's too much work. So those were the 2 main issues that I had to work through as I started homeschooling. Also, in the midst of all this, we converted to Catholicism. When my son was 1, I was an atheist. So I steered clear of anything that I researched that had anything to do with God. I would look at homeschool curriculum and be like, oh, that looks cool, but Jesus. So it's clearly that's changed. And then I had to look around. Suddenly I wanted to do catechesis and do faith education, and I couldn't find anything. Now, I know better. There are so many Catholic homeschool curriculum that include all this stuff. So there's that. I just didn't know it at the time. It is so frustrating as you're starting to look to just go to a search engine and search for, homeschool curriculum for these ages. Wow, there's so much out there and it's so overwhelming. Right? The same as if you look at somebody who has been celebrating the Catholic feast days for a long time and they have like an amazing activity for every single liturgical season and feast day. It's really overwhelming. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I found, and I agree with, is that you start in a more minimalist fashion. Look at what you have to teach. Can you just teach it through reading books together? Are there life lessons, life skills like cooking that you can include math lessons in? Great, do that. Learn with Legos. You don't have to make it a big thing. It doesn't have to be complicated and overwhelming when you get started. I would say dip your feet in, have a general plan, and then you can add things in. Like if you notice, I noticed, right, when we were doing this super minimalist, underwhelming homeschooling, I wasn't doing art at all. And I would even say, oh, we don't do art in school because that's more of a craft and we're just here to educate, not entertain. I know this sounds ridiculous as I'm saying it. But then I was too lazy after the fact. I'm like, oh, I did school already. I don't really feel like setting up an activity. Ugh. So I realized that was a big gap. My children really wanted to do art. I was being lazy about it. So I found this really sweet homeschool art program it goes by grade, and it's a DVD. And so we had to figure out a way to play a DVD. And it's a home art studio with Lindsay Bolin. We got from jerrysartorama.com. And the kids love watching the little art videos. They're about 10 minutes long, maybe not even. And she goes through the process of how to create the art. And then during the time that they're watching the art video, I set up the supplies, we do the project. And of course, then, when it's outside of school time, they're doing their open-ended crafts and activities. But at least we have this, like they're learning. I think that's really important as a homeschool parent to have other people also teach your children, because you want them to get used to different teaching styles. So by video, I have another teacher for my children, and it's good for them to hear the way that this woman teaches and to follow directions and have a process, because there's different types of art, and having this kind of process art is good for small children or anybody. So I realized that gap there, which I wouldn't have known if I plugged everything in, try to do it all, got overwhelmed and quit. Rather, it's better to start with maybe a little bit less, but still cover all the subjects that you'd like to, and then add things in as you go. Nature walks. You always hear about nature walks. It can be a little overwhelming with that. I didn't even know how to fit those in. My kids aren't like super interested in them, especially not journaling afterwards. It's just been a real miss for us. But every year I put it in, and sometimes we do them and sometimes we don't. And that's okay. That's okay. Now, of course, depending on where you live, there could be stricter regulations that make it so that you really do have to plan more. In the state of Wisconsin, where we currently live, it's very different than the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was very, very strict, and even I believe had like you had to still do the standardized testing, and so it was a little bit more stressful. So I can't really speak to how it is in your state because I don't know where you're listening from, but do find about the legality and what you actually have to do. And also, if you can, find other Catholic homeschoolers, because that really helps too. In our area, we have a well-developed, rooted Catholic homeschooling group that's been around for like 20 years. And there's so much goodness in the forums and just resources, so that even if you have a question about legal stuff, they can point you to the right website. So you're just not, searching blindly through the annals of the internet. So the process of getting started, I would suggest that you write down the things that you like to do, that your children like to do, and then also see what they need to do, and start from there. If you're really like just trying to figure out what to search for. So what your kids like to do they like to read aloud? Are they not quite readers yet? Like, how can you develop that love? These are things you just make a list. Just make a list. Start with a list. That's always good. Strength, weaknesses, likes, dislikes, the needs and just wants, right? Just create a big list. And then you can go hunting, which I will show you. I'm trying to see. A friend of mine who's also a fellow homeschooling mom sent me this great image of different Catholic homeschool curricula. And of course you can't see it on my phone, but I'm gonna find a way to share that with you, so that you can at least have some ideas of where to get started in searching. I also shared on Instagram, which will disappear. Well, you know what I'll do? This is easy. I'm going to go to Instagram and I'll put this all in my stories, and then I'll make a highlight reel of all of this. So you can find under homeschooling, you'll be able to find this curriculum guide. You'll be able to find what I currently use, which may change year to year. But yeah, I'll put it there. So go to my Instagram at the Catholic Mama on Instagram. I'll have a highlight called homeschooling, and I'll have all this in there, and you can just click and look at what I've been referring to. Also, just remind me, because I said at the beginning that we've changed how we do our homeschooling. I got a really good advice once from someone who said, you take it year by year, child by child. If you have a special needs child, they probably will need to go to school in some capacity. Or you'll just need a tutor or some outside, an aide or something. So, or you might have a child who really does need to be in a more socialized, regular schedule. Okay, you can do that. You can make those decisions and keep the doors open. That actually really helped me when we started in kindergarten. I said, well, if I screw up kindergarten, it's not that bad. My dad didn't even go to kindergarten. He's fine. We can work through it. We'll figure it out. But if I mess up kindergarten, they're going to be able to catch up pretty fast. So I like that we started young. But I did say, let's just do my husband, because he was skeptical. Let's just do a trial year, and that took the pressure off. It really did. And we wound up having a really good year anyway, even though we did have to switch halfway through. Um, Depending on so what I wound up doing after I realized there was an in-between step between trying to figure it all out on my own and create a whole curriculum all by myself, and also then doing the bare minimum and it being pretty boring and not very beautiful. I had this middle step that actually worked out really well for preschool. And that was a wefolkart.com. They had this Simple Seasons homeschool curriculum, a short one for summer, longer ones for the other 3 seasons. And it is a literature based. There's an activity and one main book and 1 or 2 auxiliary books, optional books for each week. It turns out to be a lot of books, but if you have more than 1 child that's going to go through it, it makes financial sense to buy them, get them used, or you might be able to find them at your library. Although since they are seasonal books, the library tends to have those checked out already, but you could always swap to other seasonal books. But this Simple Seasons one is one that I do with my preschoolers for the first year. So whenever they're really starting to get interested, last year, one of my daughters who had just turned 3, I kept hearing, "What about me? What can I do?" Every time I would set up the older kids with school, "What about me? What can I do?" And I realized that she really wanted something, but I didn't really want to teach her yet either with a set curriculum. So this Simple Seasons has worked out. I've used it for 3 of my children for the first year, and then we go into other things. But it's a nice, gentle way of easing into some kind of organized activity and schooling that I think is really sweet for those young ages. I believe that you can do it still through kindergarten, though, if you would like. We just haven't. We found other things and moved on. But I think that's a really good starting one. If you really just want to dip your toes in, you're not quite sure, you don't want to do all the research just yet, I do recommend Simple Seasons by wefolkart.com. I think it's pretty inexpensive too, like maybe $10 or something. I haven't seen it. It's been a long time since I bought it. Excuse me. And then the final thing, as you decide what curriculum to use for a given year or curricula, I mean, we blend. You'll see that if you go to my Instagram on the homeschooling archive. We have like 4 or 5 different curricula that we use because over time I've been able to draw in different ideas, knowing what my kids like and don't like. And this is where we are. We got a lot of curricula that we use. And I don't mind it that way because it's different teaching styles. And just like you would have different teachers with different teaching styles in a class setting, we learn in different ways with this. So just briefly, we use The Good and the Beautiful for a number of things. It is a non-denominational Christian curriculum. So there are issues with, say, history and even parts of science where they don't get it right, and it's very Protestant heavy. So we don't use it for that at all. And then with science, most of it's fine. I've only come across one issue with Galileo. And then we use TAN Books has a great new homeschooling curriculum. We use that for history. We use Catholic Heritage for geography and social studies. Song School for our Greek lessons, a lot of read aloud. I mean, it sounds like a lot when you see it, but it's spread out and we do different blocks. And for us, it's very minimalist and we're done with school in less than 2 hours. And I'm schooling 3 children currently. So we get it all done in less than 2 hours of hands-on time. It's pretty good. Yeah, all that's going to be on Instagram. So if you're just getting started, I highly suggest take a deep breath. Don't think that you have to do all things from the very beginning, and don't think that you have to know it all. Your kids aren't going to notice if you don't know it all, and you'll realize as the time goes on where the gaps are. Like suddenly you realize your child is having a difficult time counting past 20. Okay, you can find something specific for that and work on it. Or you realize that maybe you're slacking on your catechesis. There's certainly plenty of stuff to find to work on that. You don't have to have it all fixed up and beautiful and ready to go. But I would suggest that once you get started for the year, not to continue to shop for curriculum or ideas. It's just like a woman who has already picked out her wedding dress. You know, the advice not to keep looking at wedding dresses because you'll change your mind and everything else will look good. Yeah, just don't. You pick a curriculum, just stick with it. Give it some time. You don't want to program hop because it's expensive. It's confusing. It's intensive energy and resource wise. So just try to stick with it for a while, a quarter, a semester, unless there is like a real problem. Like I noticed that our kids were having a real difficulty with one of the curriculum that we were doing, and I had to switch, and it all worked out really, really well. But I stuck out for 6 months with it first, just to see if this really was an issue, if it's just a different learning style that they needed to get used to. So we took our time with it. So give it some time, unless there is like a real glaring issue that can't be fixed by modifying it in the first place. And you just have to like throw it in the trash heap and move on to something else. And also, when you talk to other homeschooling families and they say that, oh, I love Charlotte Mason, ask why. Make sure that you're asking these why questions. Or I love Catholic Heritage. Okay, but why? Because then they might say that they love something because of the rigorous schedule. You're like, well, I don't like that. I don't want a rigorous schedule. So find out why. And then also just be gentle with yourself as you get started. You will figure this out as you go along. And even if you don't know all the subjects, you don't have to. One of the best pieces of advice that I got from a veteran homeschooler, because I converted just a few years ago, and I was nervous that I would fail my children in teaching them the faith. And a couple of veteran homeschoolers, actually, because I posted this in a forum, jumped in and said, no, you'll learn too. So you'll learn along with your children, and you'll grow in confidence as you go along. If you are looking to transition your older children out of public school into homeschooling, I'm sorry, I'm not there yet, so I don't have the experience. There are so many other mothers who have been in the trenches for a number of years that can offer that. I'm hoping this video is helpful to you if you are fresh to homeschooling or just thinking about it, or if you have children in those younger grades. It's a beautiful thing to be home. The Catholic Catechism states that the home is the primary school for children. And we're called to educate our children. And anytime we proclaim truth, we're proclaiming Jesus. So the education that we give our children isn't just about the history of the Catholic Church or scripture. It is really about truth. And anytime we teach truth to our children, we are doing our jobs as the main shepherds and teachers of our children. So you can do it. Pray to God for help and the Holy Spirit. And you can, it's good. It's all good. It frees you up for a really beautiful life, although it is challenging and absolutely challenging. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any further questions about getting started with homeschooling, just pop a comment below and I will answer it soon. All right. Thank you, everyone. Until next time.